Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In today's session, which is our second session, before we get into examining and connecting him on an emotional level with the Sahabas, we need to first understand what Makkah was like back in the day. We need to understand what kind of society existed at that particular time and why was there a need for something new to come and rectify the existing system at that time. And obviously, when we look at the Sahabas, we need to understand from their perspective what kind of society were they actually living in. And once we sort of capture that essence and we sort of picture that environment in which they were, I think we will be able to better understand the decisions that they took and the consequences that they faced and the environment in which they had to deal with all the problems that came towards them. And one of the major things that we need to keep in mind is the fact that when Islam arrived in Makkah, it did not come into a primitive tribal village. It entered a society that was economical flourishing. It was advanced. It was commercially advanced. They had trade routes that were going down to Yemen, up to Syria, Damascus. They were very eloquent individuals. It was a society which was very advanced for its time. The Quraysh were a very proud people. Makkah was the center of trade. And if we read history and we go into history, we'll see the impact that Makkah actually had in Arabia at that moment in time. So it was not that it was a tribal and backward, not at all. It was a very eloquent society. And when we understand or when we read about it and we think about this, we need to keep in mind that we don't want to compare the advancements of today's time with what existed back then, but we need to appreciate what existed back then in their true sense. So whatever advancement was there in Arabia, they were at the top of their game at that moment in time. They were the center for Arabia at that moment in time. And obviously they were a very sort of sought out environment in which they were by the other Arabs and Bedouins that were around in that area. There was religious polarity, meaning there were a lot of different religions that existed. We know for a fact from history that Christians were there as well. The Kuffar or the Quraysh or the Makkans at that time, they interacted with the Jews, with the Christians, with the Byzantine Empire, with the Persians. So they had a very clear understanding that different religion did exist besides theirs. And they were fine with it. They didn't have any issues with that. And there were, and even in Makkah at that precise moment in time, there were Christians that lived there. They had dealing with the Jews that were living in Medina. So there wasn't an issue of having another religion, which they were perfectly fine. And if you recall back when Islam did come, they did come to the Prophet and said that, just don't say bad things about us. You want to become Muslim, practice your religion. It's not an issue. The major problem that existed was the fact that there was a disconnection that was present within the Meccan society, the social fabric, the moral fabric, the value systems, the ethical systems that existed, and the way they conducted themselves. So in many ways, I think it would be not wrong to say that pre-Islamic Mecca actually resembled the modern secular capitalist world that we live in today. I mean, if you look at the way society is structured at this precise moment in time, there is a freedom of religion. You can practice any religion that you want, no problem whatsoever. But just don't, change the system. Don't hurt the capitalist over there. Don't, talk about the evil and the wrong that exists because of these particular systems. So if you want to pray, pray. You want to fast, fast. That's perfectly fine. There are many countries, and I'm not going to name any, but I think you all know who there are. You can practice whatever you want, whatever religion that you want, whenever you want, however you want. They never stop you. And I think that is something we need to understand as well before we move forward with the project, that we need to study the past in order to understand the present. And obviously, and once we do that, and as we look forward, there's going to be some unsettling reflections that we're going to see in the past with the present that we have today. And one of the things that really, I think, that makes me think is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was actually sent as a messenger till the end of time to the whole of mankind. And if you read the Quran, you will see that you have stories about Yusuf alayhi salam, you have stories about Musa alayhi salam, you have stories about how society was functioning at that time. And if you look at the global village that we are in today, parts of that is a reflection of the society that we live in. The problems that they faced have essence and implications in today's time and period. And obviously, when we look at this, we need to understand that it was not an atheistic society that existed. It was a secular. And when we say secular, we don't actually mean that, they didn't believe in anything. The Meccans at that time acknowledged that there was a God. They acknowledged Allah as their creator. The Kaaba was there. The rituals were there. The main thing that they had issues with, and I feel that this is something that we need to understand and sort of have a contrast with the society that we're in today, that religion is there, you're praying, you're doing everything, but is there still injustice? Does that still exist? Is there any regulations of ethics? Was there any regulation of ethics back then? And obviously all of that, how is that shaping the daily life that exists in Makkah? So they have the Kaaba, they believe in God, they have all of these things. Yeah, they associate different deities and different elements with that. But a sense of religion still exists, and this use religion. One of the major income that they used to have was of the pilgrimage that used to happen to Makkah at that time. And does that happen now? Is there any questions that need to be raised regarding that? Are we more focused on the wealth? Is religion being used for a worldly gain? Was that something the Quraysh were doing at that time? Did Islam, and if you think about it, one of the major problems that the Quraysh had was the fact that if we accept Islam and we accept this religion, all of our superiority and wealth and moral standing is going to go, because now who's going to come worship their idols and all these tribes that exist? So we can't do it, because accepting Islam was surrendering their wealth, their power, from their perspective, obviously, everything that they hold very dear to themselves. And religion for them was only allowed if it did not interfere with their power, with their wealth, and with their desire. So a religion is fine as long as it doesn't have an impact on these things. And Islam obviously was, cleaning away all these elements. And this is something that they didn't want to happen. And when you talk about wealth and when we talk about these elements, one of the major principles that exist in today's time is capitalism. And obviously, Makkah at that time was a commercial hub that had long distance trade and seasonal market that existed, with significant wealth accumulations. So the problem wasn't commercial. It was an economic system that did not have a moral compass. So there were monopolies that existed. The rich got rich, the poor got poor. It was the wealthy exploited. There was wealth accumulation. That was the ultimate goal. The more money that you can get, the better respect that you're going to have. So basically, they were the Elon Musks and Bill Gates of that time. And basically, the more wealth you had, the moral worth that you had, and whatever you said went. So if someone was extremely wealthy, they had a very important say in the matters of how society was shaped, how Makkah was run at that precise moment in time. And power only existed with the rich. Now, again, if you look back and you do a comparison with the society that we live in today, is that not does that not hold true today? Is that not the ultimate fact in today's time and period? Is that not how society functions now? So is it wrong to say that the first generations of Muslim that existed in that time were facing similar problems to what we are facing now? And I think having the Sahaba project at this moment in time is going to help us understand how these individuals face these problems and what sacrifices that they did, and how can we do the similar and conduct ourselves in a similar way, and conduct ourselves in a way that does justice to Islam and helps us understand the methodology that they followed. Obviously, moving forward, and I want to highlight this hopefully as we move forward with different Sahabas, in what area that they worked in. Because studying the Sahabas, it was very interesting that not all of them were working towards or having an impact in one particular way. They were having impact in different ways. And I think that is the beauty of how Islam was spread. We had some people that were entrepreneurs. We had some people that were financial gurus. We had some people that understood politics. We had some people that understood economics. We had some people that were teachers and professors, meaning the mindset of that still existed at that time. And these Sahabas do fall into those categories as well. Some were military geniuses of that time. Some people had foresight and were foreign dignitaries and knew how to conduct themselves and present themselves to rulers. So the foreign policies that were crafted at that time were absolutely brilliant. Some of the laws that were created by the lawmakers by some of these Sahabas are still implemented to a high degree in today's time and are actually relevant in today's time. And I feel that is the beauty of understanding the lives of the Sahaba. And to highlight one particular aspect, which I feel is very important, that in today's time, when we look at an individual and we associate or we accept them as role models, or we accept them as someone to look up to, there are certain criterias that we have, generally as human beings, that we sort of focus on. And I want to highlight those so you understand the value system of character that they were actually weighing individuals on. So in today's time, do they have a social media presence? A very good presence, millions of subscribers, millions of followers. How wealthy are they? Do they have a flashy lifestyle? What title do they hold? Who are they associated with? Who do they rub shoulders with? That kind of thing. So if you meet a person that is, who falls under that category, you're automatically going to give them respect because, oh, this guy is a CEO, he has a lot of business, oh, he has $1 trillion in his bank account, or he has 10 million followers on Instagram or Facebook. So we associate those elements with individuals. So in Makkah at that time, the way they weighed and valued individuals were based on lineage. Was wealth, what tribe did they belong to, how much money they had, who were their ancestors, who were their grandfather, what kind of public image existed for them. And obviously, if they had a lot of wealth and they came from a very proud and noble family, and their tribe was very strong and had a lot of wealth and a lot of power and had military and had arms and things like that, and they were very eloquent, so they could do whatever they want, and people looked up to them as role models. And obviously that all of these things, there was no moral compass to regulate how they should behave and what kind of parameters they need to put in to constrain themselves so they do not become tyrants. And I feel that as we go forward, you'll be able to see that was one of the major elements that led to the violence and cruelty that existed in Makkah, meaning this was a society which had wealth, this was a society with noble and lineage individuals, but at the same time females were being buried alive. And this place still exists in Makkah, the graveyard where they used to take their infant daughters and they used to bury them alive. It still exists. That land is still there, and if you ever travel to Makkah, you can go see it with your own eyes. that, this was a norm that was being done in Makkah at that time. Slaves had no rights whatsoever. They were beaten without any accountability. We know from different historical records how accurate that was. With, for example, one of the major Muslim stories of Bilal radiallahu anha, we know about him and how he was tortured and how he was being forced. We know about Sumayya radiallahu anha, how she was martyred in this cause, how she was tortured, how the family of Yasser was tortured. And women were treated like property. I mean, if you think about it again, I always, whenever I read this and I try to do a comparison, it's quite shocking, and it's quite heartbreaking to see that is exactly how women are treated now, as commodity. If you want to do marketing, what do? You put a pretty woman on a billboard and boom, you're good to go. If you want 1 million views on a video, put a woman, 1 million views over there. If you want to sell anything, you have women over there. So what are women? They're treated like property. They're a commodity. There's a value on them, and that is a sad reality that still exists in today's time. That is a reflection, that is a mirror of the society that existed at that time. Inheritance injustice, does that not exist in today's time? It existed then. Even Islam, after 1400 years ago, there are people that do not give an inheritance to their daughters. Still, even in today, after so much has happened, there is injustice. Lying in trade, does that not happen? Cheating foreigners, does that not happen? And even in today's time, it happens. And these were the ethical numbness that existed in Makkah at that time, and these are the ethical numbness that still exists in today's time. They swear that this is 100% pure, it's not 100% pure. They swear that this is the price, it's not the price. All of these practices that they do still exist today. And even if you add on top of them, there was also one major problem that existed then that exists today. Something that society right now, if you look at the Western culture or the Western society, even in the Middle East or in the Eastern side, this is becoming a major problem in many households, is the culture, is the social habits of gambling and drinking, which is destroying families because it doesn't have any moral concerns. It is becoming widespread. It exists in Muslim countries now. It existed in Makkah 1400 years ago, and it still exists today in today's time. So all these evils that were there, and the reason why Islam came and thus the first generation of Muslim fought and changed and brought Islam, all those negativities and evils and all those elements can clearly be seen on a global stage in today's time. And that is the ultimate truth. I mean, none of what I'm saying you would refute and say, no, that's not true, that's not happening in today's time, that those evils are long gone and that doesn't exist anymore. It exists. And in our time. And what are we doing regarding that is a question that we need to ask ourselves. How do we navigate it? How do we protect ourselves and our children? What role are we playing? And how do we sort of, go about changing it? Now the big question comes that obviously when all of these evils are happening, there are people that are doing good. There are NGOs that are helping the poor. There are NGOs that are providing food and shelter in Gaza, in Kashmir, in Sudan. There are people that are moving forward and doing all of these amazing stuff in different countries. Yes, they do exist, and you know what? They existed back then as well. They existed back then as well. They were there. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anha, Hazrat Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. These were social activists before Islam came, before he became a Nabi, before he became a Rasul. These were the modern activists and social workers. And what they used to do, they used to be compassionate. They would free the slave. They would support the weak. They would do charities. They were the NGOs of Makkah at that time, these individuals. They were a group of friends. The early Muslims were the individuals that, understood the evils of society, and they were using their wealth, their skills, their time, their talent, their social standing to help the poor. They were the individuals that supported the widows and the orphans. They understood the fabrics of evil in society, and they wanted to fix it as much as they could. They were the individuals that were there. But at the same time, why wasn't any change happening? Why wasn't anything, being fixed on a bigger level? Because they were working on the grassroots level and they were fixing the problems on the bottom, but the system was still the same. Their accountability was long gone. There was no belief in final moral reckoning, because the people in power said, we have the money, we have the wealth, we need more of it. We're going to die. No one's going to ask about anything about any of the things we do. So let us live free and do whatever we want. Just don't talk about religion. Keep quiet. And we can do whatever we want. The strong wrote the moral rules of morality. The powerful said what was right and what was wrong. Rituals that were lost because of their collective power. So it was basically, religion had become symbolic. That's it. Alhamdulillah, that's not the case now. Alhamdulillah, religion is not symbolic anyways. Now everyone is a practicing Muslim. I mean, this is the ground reality, and it is very scary when I was doing this comparison. And the more I compared it, the more today's world looked like the Makkah of 1400 years ago. The same, no difference. Success justified injustice. So if it works, why replace it? It's simple as that. If we're making more money by cheating, if we're making more money by this methodology, keep at it. There is no need to, rectify anything. And obviously, if you can make more money by it, just continue doing it. And literally, all of this led to one particular thing, which was the fact that human beings became tools. They became numbers. Does that sound familiar? By followers and subscribers and likes and shares, numbers. Organic growth, as we call it. The poor and the women and the slaves were seen as expendable assets. And even in today's time, we look at the organic growth as assets, numbers, human beings. So a lot of what existed back then exists in today's time. And obviously, everyone that is watching at home or on the internet, I want you to comment in the comment section below and share your thoughts as well. Maybe I've missed something. Maybe I'm wrong. Put your 2 cents. And we'll definitely include it. And obviously, as you guys are writing, you would understand more of it as we move forward as well, and you can share your thoughts with me. So Islam was not another option. And that is something that we need to understand, that it was not another option in Mecca. It's not another option now. It was an intervention. It was where all the wrongs were happening and everything, the NGOs existed and everyone was working all day. There needed to be a system that would intervene and stop the injustice. It did not add new rituals to the existing system that existed. It did not offer another path for personal comfort, so you can select some things that you want out of religion and let the other things go. This is okay. Fasting is a little bit difficult. Just leave that. I don't want to pay zakah. Leave that. Leave the inherit. No. Islam brought a way of life that created a parameter in which we needed to work in, and it provided it reconnected belief and ethics, if you want to look at it from that way, which was disconnected even in Makkah and in today's time. So it connected belief and ethic, and it restored human dignity, universal human dignity. It restored it. It gave value to so-called assets and human beings. It gave it dignified individuals from every walk of life, and it challenged the unjust economic and social systems, which is, I think, the essence of everything the root of all evils that existed then and that exists now. Because when you hurt someone's wealth and you hurt someone's inability to earn, that is something, they fight on. And that is one of the major reasons a lot of kuffar or Quraysh at that time did not accept Islam. And Islam came to rebuild society inside out. And if you look at even right now in every society where any reverts that you meet and you speak to them, you have to fix yourself before you fix others. So the change happens inside before it comes out. And that happens true for any individual, any family, any household, any society, any nation, any country. You have to rebuild from inside in order for it to have an impact on the outside. And obviously, once that revolution became real, it hurt the elites. It hurts them now, it hurts them before. It broke the social hierarchy that they had created. It broke the trade monopolies that they had. And it broke the moral constraints or moral degradation of society. And it was taking them out of it. So the revolution was real. And Islam's mission was very systematic. And it posed a direct threat to the established order then. And funny enough, if I say this again and listen to this again, that Islam's mission was systematic. It was posing a direct threat to the established order then and now as well. And this is the same problem that they were fighting against, that Quraysh was fighting against. And I think I would not be wrong to say that is still the case in today's time and period. So obviously in this context, and having this key is very important for us to understand the sacrifices and the struggles of the first Muslims. And obviously one of the things even in our last session, which I said, was the fact that I want you guys, even at home and here, that I want you guys to write down the questions that you would ask the Sahabas regarding their struggles. And obviously as we read about them, we will understand how they went about sort of facing these challenges and resolving these challenges. And obviously these Sahabas are not just characters in a story. I mean, if you talk about Abu Bakr radiallahu anha, the oppressive capitalist worlds that he lived in, how he used his wealth, Uthman radiallahu anhu, how the corrupt status-driven system that he navigated in, and Bilal radiallahu anhu that we spoke about as well, the brutal systematic of cruelty that he faced, and Khadija radiallahu anhu, the deep-seated injustice she sacrificed her wealth to fight. So these are companions, these are individuals, these are Sahabas that had such a huge role to play, and sacrifices that they did, and the navigation that they developed, that I think we need to follow as well. And when we grasp their context, they cease, I feel, to be merely inspiring people. And they become transformative models for us. And I feel that by taking and making compromised and principled choices that they did, they showed us that this can be done. And more than that, I feel that they showed us that by making those choices, they brought a real change in society. And that is something that even we could do if we have the roadmap and we can create the roadmap. So this brings us to a very important question, is that where would we stand if we were living in that time? I'm going to do a quote on that, because we kind of are. And seeing the system as it was, what kind of choices would I make in that society? What kind of choices would you make in that society? Would you and I be part of that elite that exploited, or the ethical minority that was trying to patch a broken system? When the call for fundamental change arrived, Where would I stand? When the call of Islam came, where would I stand? Would I be analyzing and thinking that, oh man, I'm gonna have to give up a lot of stuff. No more movies, no more going out, no more spending, flashy cars and my wealth in any way I want. I gotta be regulated. I gotta give inheritance. I gotta give zakat. I gotta fast. I gotta pray. Where am I gonna stand? Do I have to believe something that my family is going to go against, my friends are going to go against? What is society going to say? What are people going to say? I'm going to lose everything. They'll point fingers at me. How am I going to stand up to that kind of that? And what does Islam demand? And what does Islam demand from you and me today? And obviously, when we compare the society back then and we compare the society right now and we see the resemblance between it, are we not in a similar position as the early Muslims were to some degree? I'm not going to say exactly. Obviously, that's wrong. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. The problems that existed then exist today. Makkah before Islam was not ignorant because it lacked intelligence. It was ignorant because it lacked moral restraint. It was wealthy. It was global. It was connected and it was successful. Everything that exists in today's time. Yet, all of that, it was yet deeply unjust. Is that not the reality that we live in today? And Islam did not come to fix the rituals. What Islam came was to fix people, systems, and values. And I feel that is very true in today's time and period as well. That if we do a comparison, that still exists today. If we do a comparison between the injustice, between the wealth, between the globalness of this global village that we live in, that still holds true today. One of the things that when I was comparing and when I was doing my study that I came across and I felt that it was a breath of fresh air for me was the fact that during in the last couple of, I think, a year or so, when the oppression and the genocide started in Gaza, Muslims across the globe, Muslims and non-Muslims as well for that matter, but Muslims generally across the globe, they made an individualistic decisions themselves that came from the inside. They didn't do anything that they were being told to do. There was no leader that came across, no country that was saying anything. Every single individual made a decision themselves that they will not support, buy, or go to any of the outlets that are actually helping and supporting the genocide that is happening. And that had a huge impact. And I believe that if we are able to understand and collectively, individualistically, make a decision, it's going to have a collective impact, no doubt about it. And there are billions of Muslims right now, and we're talking about moral values. We're not talking about something out of the blue. Don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat. There has to be a society that collectively helps one another. There should be no social injustice. Even though we're global, we're connected. We're successful. So was Makkah at that time, and so is the global village that we live in right now. Even if you look at Muslim countries, many Muslim countries for that fact, are they not rich? Don't they have money? Don't they have armies? Are we not living in a society where we say that we are now the epic level of technology with AI and everything that's happening? This is a society that says that we are the best of the best at this moment in time, the world that we live in right now. And this is the same thing that was claimed back in the day. So there is a clear comparison of the first generational Muslims and the problems that they faced, the society that they were in, and the society that we are in today. Very similar problems. And inshallah, when we move ahead and we discuss and explore and emotionally connect and see the way these first generational Muslims, the Sahabas, how they navigated these issues, how they faced the problems, how they, found ways in fixing these elements. And if we're able to take even one element from that character and that personality, we will be able to, and implement this on ourselves individually, is going to have a global and collective impact. So with that, we will end today's session, and inshallah we will continue our next session, which is going to be the third session, in which we will start with the first Muslim, which is Khadija radiallahu anha, and we will speak about her. She is a remarkable woman. I have read many biographies, but the way she conducted herself before Islam, the way she conducted herself in Islam, the way she established the foundation of what we have today is paramount. Amazing. Her way of thinking, the way she was as a mother, as a wife, as a leader, as a businesswoman, the way she conducted, graceful, eloquent, beautiful. It has no words to describe how perfect she was, and how Allah chose her for this particular role, and how she beautifully, completed it. And I honestly, and still I'm reading about her, and the more I read, the more I want to meet her, and the more I want to sit with her in Jannah, and the more I want to, ask her so many questions. And inshallah, collectively, we will be able to do that. So thank you very much, everyone, for your patience, and I hope you have written all the questions in these sessions. And even everyone that is watching online, I suggest that you also share those questions either on the platform in the community that we've made on NAS, or in the comment section down below. And we will take that, the team will take that on board, and we will share all of that as well. Even everyone over here, you can also share your questions. And I think this is, like I said before in our first session, this is a collective journey that we're on. I'm learning, and if I've missed anything, if you feel that I need to add something, or if you feel I've said something that is incorrect, do let me know. We will collectively be on this journey, and inshallah, hopefully, I don't see an end to this journey, so it will be a long journey that we're going to be on it together, and we'll learn from one another. Thank you very much, everyone, and inshallah, we'll see you in the next session. Take care.